Welcome, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome to this week's edition of the Sunday Wire. I'm your host, Patrick Henningsen. We're streaming out live on the Alternate Current Radio Network, also at 21stcenturywire.com. We're also streaming out live on X, Rumble, Facebook, YouTube, Facebook Live, also on the audio streams as well after the program. And it's great to be with you. This is episode 544 of this weekly omnibus news and analysis radio program. And we'll do something a little bit different today. Normally we're in studio, we're connecting up with our team. But where I am, what part of the world I am right now, the weather is about to turn. So this is the last day of sun we might have for a week. So I decided to make sure I got out here outdoors and just enjoyed this Easter weekend. And there's a lot to reflect on and a lot to talk about. And I thought this format might be a little bit more personal. We won't be probably connecting with our team members afterwards. We'll catch up to them next week, and hopefully they're having a great break as well. So just considering what's happening in the world is a lot to reflect on. Easter symbolizing a resurrection in Christianity, a rebirth of sorts, and I think the world's going through that process. Definitely. We've been seeing that for a while, for the last couple of years. There is a bit of a rebirth happening, but at the same time, it's a painful process. And you can see, it's becoming clearer anyway to me, that you can see how the establishment, how the old system, the old control system of the 20th century based, even longer than that, I can talk about that. But this system, you can see it's lashing out. We're seeing levels of desperation that are like nothing we've ever seen in our lifetime, especially in the West. You have to remember that the last 1,000 years it's been Europe dominating the world, basically. The European continent and its colonies, including the United States. This is basically the Euro domination of the planet that's gone on for the last millennia, basically. And right now, in 2025, and people have been commenting on the emergence of BRICS and the emergence of China, Russia as well, India, Africa. There's a renaissance going on in Africa right now. That's unbelievable. Politically, levels of awareness, just people taking stock and reevaluating the formation of that continent, the post-colonial formation of that continent. I would say the same in many ways about South America as well. But this old order is really having a difficult time accepting the fact that there might be other poles of influence emerging. And a lot's been said and, of course, commented, and certainly we have, on the multipolar world. And the problem with the multipolar world from a Western-centric point of view is that means no more U.S. or Anglo-American or U.S.-European global hegemony, and specifically U.S. hegemony if we're talking about the last 100 years. And, you know, how's the U.S. going to compete with other poles of influence? They, just by the moves being made by the Trump administration, they don't really want to compete. You can see they're engaging in economic warfare. And interpret any gains made by any other country, like China, for instance, or any other country that's the U.S. is running a trade deficit with, which is everybody, and they have been running a trade deficit since 1934. So this is nothing new. It's not a state of emergency, as Trump so disingenuously used an executive or an emergency action to implement economic warfare against the rest of the world. And the United States has always been running deficits because that's a choice the U.S. made years ago in order to maintain a global dollar reserve currency. And that's been the source of America's power and influence. It's been able to shape the world through a global reserve currency, the U.S. dollar. And that really sort of gained steam after the United States went off the gold standard and onto the petrodollar post-Bretton Woods. And Henry Kissinger, Richard Nixon, the old brain trust of the 1960s and 70s. And once the U.S. did that, it started running an unlimited deficit. It was believed that this was the only way. This is how the United States was going to basically export its dollars all over the world, worthless fiat dollars, and get real goods in return. It's a good deal. Low prices at home, keeping everybody hooked on the dollar, and playing with interest rates all the while in order to create boom and bust cycles globally. And the United States has been able to run a $2 trillion a year deficit. That's probably the most important part of all this, is if a country is allowed to run a $2 trillion deficit, and their military industrial complex, which they use to enforce their dollar hegemony, costs around $1 trillion a year, well, they're doing that off the back of deficit spending, the national credit card. Imagine if every country did that. Where would we be? We probably wouldn't be here. The world would have already gone up into smoke in the Third and Fourth World Wars by now. But the United States has that privilege it's given itself, and then disingenuously turning around, as Trump has done, and say, the world is ripping us off, they're ripping us off, we're getting a bad deal. And this line, this shtick that this president can't come up with a better narrative than to sell an absolute lie. It's more than a lie, it goes to the heart of the matter, which is that the U.S. president it doesn't appear that he understands how the United States financial preponderance works. That he doesn't understand how the global reserve currency works. Maybe he has a rough idea, but he really doesn't understand it. Certainly maybe his Treasury Secretary, Scott Bessent, does. And maybe, of course, Howard Lutnick, his Commerce Secretary, which is his shadow. This is the president's handler, following him everywhere. Behind every curtain, you find the Commerce Secretary there, representing the banking elite from Wall Street and the Israeli lobby, etc. So they understand that the United States has been running a fiat global empire based on trust that the United States dollar will be redeemed upon presentation of the bonds and all the other debt the United States has piled up in order to maintain this global Ponzi scheme. Okay, now the interest coming due on $9 trillion of debt, they're panicking in Washington. They need to refinance this. The only way they can really refinance it is to force the value of the dollar down, force it down, to devalue the dollar, and then lowering interest payments by doing that, and somehow by magic increasing U.S. exports when the U.S. doesn't have a manufacturing base. So it's an incredible gymnastics move. Maybe it'll be successful, maybe it won't. Early indicators are the fundamentals just aren't there for the U.S. to pull this one off. But it might be enough to get Trump through the first couple of years of his first term. But beyond that, there's no structural remedy here. This is really a real gamble by Trump, and he's gambling the livelihoods of everybody in the country today and the global economy as well. So the rich certainly got rich and made off like bandits when the stock market crashed 2 weeks ago after Trump announced his tariff wars. They all made money. They've all been shorting the market since February, or before that even. They knew, especially if you knew it was coming down the pipeline, this type of insider trading with Trump and his inner circle makes Nancy Pelosi's stock tips look like lunch money, okay? The amount of money these people are making, it's in the tens, hundreds of billions, okay, for this elite class. They've done very well, while everybody else is going to suffer inflation, a recession, stagflation, and so on. Nothing for the working class, certainly nothing for the middle class or what's left of it. That's the reality of MAGA, okay? And this is a critique coming from the conservative side. So really trying to hoodwink the American people into this situation is quite extraordinary, and nobody really articulating what the master plan is. Maybe somebody knows somewhere, but they're not really articulating it to the public, maybe because they're busy building up the ground floor of their private fiefdoms to be the next Rockefellers, Carnegies, Mellons for the next 100 years through the implementation of some proprietary CBD, central bank digital currency, or stablecoin, whatever Trump and his inner circle and Peter Thiel and the digital oligarchs are planning. They're not telling you. They'll tell you when they're ready And they prepared on their end to fully control and fully capitalize on the new system, the new reset, or to build a parallel lane, which they're currently constructing. But it gets back to that original point, which is that the United States doesn't know what it's like to compete with anybody else in the world because they managed to game the global economy for so long. And now they're realizing that they've been playing this financial game, this financial Ponzi scheme, and why they've eschewed all of the fundamentals of the industrial economy, of the state intervention and the harmonization of private and public interests that the United States used to become the world superpower in the 20th century. Now they're on a rampant privatization, deregulation, total stampede right now, in order for everybody to rinse what they can, to suck every last drop of value out of this old system, which they themselves destroyed. Okay? You and I didn't destroy it. The bankers destroyed it. They decide the boom and bust cycles. They decide what inflation's going to be. Inflation is a stealth tax. It's not declared by Congress. It's not passed by any legislation, but the decisions made by the president, by the Federal Reserve, by the central bankers will determine the inflation rate, and that's going to decide whether you're richer or poorer at the end of the month. Okay, it's a tax. It doesn't affect the wealthy. They're already buying luxury goods with all your basic overheads, and now you're paying $20 for a tuna sandwich and a bag of potato chips. And that wasn't the case 10 years ago, was it? What is the true inflation rate? Well, it's much closer to 10, 15, 17 and a half, in some cases 20, and on some critical areas 50% a year in some areas, all averaging out probably somewhere between 15 and 20%. It's expensive. Not for the wealthy, though. Not if you're well positioned. Not if you've managed to parlay a seat at the table. If you can afford 250 million or 300 million bundled from you and your tech buddies, as Elon Musk has done, you can buy a seat in the White House. In fact, you turn the White House into your co-work space. The cost of that, 300 million. The Israeli lobby, 600 million. What does it cost to pick the entire cabinet of the President of the United States? 600 million. Because that's who picked Trump's cabinet. The approved list was given to the president on the proviso that everybody on that list shows sufficient loyalty to the state of Israel. This is why the Israeli lobby and their agents of influence within Trump's transition team selected on that basis. Not based on merit, skill, certainly not expertise when it comes to foreign policy and when it comes to, quote, national security. And now you're seeing the results of that. You're seeing the attacks from the Trump administration against the First Amendment. Free speech is no longer free in America. Any students, legal residents, green card holders, married to American citizens that dare to criticize the state of Israel are being deported, kidnapped by ICE and deported, writing an op-ed. Fulbright scholars. You know how hard it is to get a Fulbright scholarship. That's the top of the top. They kidnapped a Fulbright scholar from Boston, one of the Boston University, I think it was Tufts, kidnapped them off the street and accused them of anti-Semitic or pro-Hamas or whatever the epithet of the day is, of this ever-expanding definition of, quote, anti-Semitism. Nobody knows what it is. Like the woke, like the gender fluidity and the pronouns, the definition keeps getting updated every week. So they must have a website where you can keep track of the new definition, so as not to fall foul of this new definition that's being used to police speech in America. But that's the reality. That's the reality. Speech is no longer free. So just imagine criticizing a foreign government will get you deported. Not even criticizing the American government or U.S. policy, criticizing a foreign government. So a foreign lobby is dictating the terms of the First Amendment of the U.S. Constitution. That's what's happening. And it's being enforced by autocrats like Marco Rubio, who pockets millions over his career from the Israeli lobby. Donald Trump has pocketed, well, in this last election cycle, him alone, 230 million. So there's a little conflict of interest there, more than a little, when the U.S. administration is attacking the First Amendment on behalf of a foreign lobby. Because when any of these cases will end up in the Supreme Court, if they're adjudicated strictly on a free speech interpretation, there's no way the government has a leg to stand on. So they're acting on behalf of foreign influence. The thing that everyone accused Russia of doing, influencing the U.S. or influencing the U.S. political system, it's actually happening, but it's not Russia, it's Israel. And they already did this in the U.K. with ousting the Labour Party leader, Jeremy Corbyn, and then ejecting any of his allies from the party, totally meddling in British politics. Foreign lobby, same lobby. Why do they do that? They do that because they want to control the foreign policy of these countries, to make sure that they act and they support and they rule in favor of Israel. Okay, so that's what's going on in America. An unbelievable situation. I never thought I would see the U.S. of all countries, the most sacrosanct of all the amendments is the First Amendment. All other amendments, the rights are derived from that ability to have a First Amendment, inalienable rights. Anyone within U.S. jurisdiction, legal or not, is entitled to those rights. And by the way, the President of the United States and his advisors, or whoever has to swear an oath, I'm not sure if anybody does these days, or if they do, whether they actually mean it, much less actually put their hand on the Bible. Mr. President, if they swear an oath, if you're a soldier, you swear this oath, don't you? What is the oath? It's you swear to protect and defend the U.S. Constitution from all enemies, foreign and domestic. So if you're a U.S. politician and you are undermining or attacking the First Amendment of the United States on behalf of a foreign government, then you're an enemy of the U.S. Constitution. You are a domestic enemy of the U.S. Constitution. If you're a foreign lobby paying for that access to cajole, manipulate, coerce, blackmail, pay off, bribe U.S. officials and office holders in order to undermine the First Amendment so as to eliminate any criticism or opposition to what that foreign country is doing, like Israel, in this case, carrying out a brutal genocide. So anybody involved in that selling out of the U.S. Constitution, that unfortunately is tantamount to treason. Maybe the media, maybe the Democrats should take a look at that. It's like an open goal for the opposition, but they won't take it. The goal's wide open, the goalkeeper's gone. You got two strikers just past midfield, there's nobody there. They won't take the shot. The Democrats won't take it. AOC won't take it. Bernie certainly won't take it. Because both parties are bought and paid for in the United States. Both parties. And that's really sad. Now you're seeing the result of having no opposition is when the nefarious elements get done with the politicians, then they start going for the machinery of government. They start attacking the U.S. Constitution because no one domestically will defend it. And all these so-called conservatives who've been showboating for the last 4 years, fighting the woke, fighting trans, real brave work. When it comes to actually defending the U.S. Constitution, they ran a mile. Most of them support Israel, so that's that. They're not going to lift a finger. They love deporting their opposition. They don't want any critics. They don't want students protesting on campus. And they've disingenuously framed this as the students are pro-Hamas or pro-terrorist. A total lie. A complete metamorphosis of the real concept. Because if you've been on a campus protest prior to Hamas coming in power. By the way, Hamas, the political party in Palestine, in Gaza, they were founded, funded, created effectively and nurtured by Shin Bet, Israeli intelligence, by Netanyahu himself, because they wanted to create a counterbalance at the time to the PLO. Unfortunately, Hamas did too good of a job looking after people and became very popular. So they want to frame this pro-Hamas, that students are pro-Hamas. They're not. Students in America, Jewish, Muslim, Christian protesters, they couldn't care less about Hamas. They're there protesting on behalf of the Palestinian people. They're there protesting for human rights. They're there opposing what the International Courts of Justice is calling a genocide. They're there protesting what the International Criminal Court, whether you signed up to it or not, have issued arrest warrants against the Israeli Prime Minister and his Defense Minister, Bibi Netanyahu and Yoav Gallant, for war crimes, crimes against humanity. That's what the students are out there for. They're out there effectively to try and save lives. They're protesting and advocating for boycott, divestment, and sanctions against a country that is clearly a rogue state, that's now acting way outside of the bounds of normal behavior, going against everything that was put into place in the post-World War II, U.S.-led, liberal internationalist, multilateral world order that created the United Nations, that created the Geneva Convention, that created the Genocide Convention to prevent the crime of all crimes, genocide. And here it is happening right in front of our eyes. And instead of doing something about it, the perpetrators and those abetting them, like the U.S. and Britain and Germany, are attacking the institutions. They're attacking the protesters, trying to stop it, trying to save lives, trying to stop the bloodshed and the carnage. That's what our elected officials in the West are busy doing. So they're being compelled to take that position out of fear, and also because they've been bribed, they've been paid to take that position. This is an incredible situation. We're in a historic inflection point. So many people have been bought and paid for. There's so much deep corruption right now. And the damage has already been done. The question is, can we prevent it, A, from spilling even further, and B, there's going to have to be a reckoning for what has just happened over the last year and a half, and then who has aided and abetted it, who has facilitated it. This reckoning is going to have to happen. There's going to have to be some sense of divine justice, and it will eventually happen. Maybe even not in our lifetime, maybe in our children or grandchildren's lifetime. But the time horizon for these events is not limited to merely a presidential term of Donald Trump or anything like that. It's much broader. Look at history. These wars, the scars of these types of brutal conflicts and slaughters and massacres, it goes on for centuries. And it will rear its ugly head in the future at some point, and your children or grandchildren or our great-grandchildren might end up paying the price for what we have done today, or for what we have allowed to happen today. Even though it's not their fault, even though they weren't even alive when it happened. The decisions we're consciously making today going to affect our progeny. And perhaps in a very negative way. Certainly that's going to be the case with Israel. Anybody living within Israel or anybody hoping to live within Israel, they're going to have to pay the price of what Netanyahu and the Israeli society has allowed to happen, has called for, which is a brutal killing and ethnic cleansing of the native Palestinian population. It's going to eventually happen. So where does that leave the United States and its political system? Morally, completely bankrupt. And still nobody wants to talk about it or acknowledge that this grave injustice is happening. The U.S. is doing everything except for piloting the planes, dropping the bombs. Everything else the United States is involved in. They're a co-belligerent. It's not Israel's war or Israel's genocide. It's the U.S. and Israel's genocide. It's the UK, it's France, it's Germany of all countries. Germany can't stop the aid and the arms to the state of Israel. The German society is so lost and so bludgeoned by history that they are so desperate to atone for their guilt of World War II that they're willing to atone for that guilt all the way down to the last Palestinian. That's quite an extraordinary irony of history. And if Germany is the top of Europe, and Europe is the titular head of Western civilization, then I will say that Western civilization has utterly failed. An abject failure. And we're watching it fail. We're watching it fail. It's collapsing under the degradation of its own moral and ethical pillars that are nothing but dust at this point. There is a chance to turn it around, or at least for some leader to arise, to speak truth to power, to say something that makes sense. But we don't see it. We still don't see it. Everybody's doubling down on it. They're afraid now. They're horrified at what they have done. And their only recourse is to double down on it. That's their only option, in their mind anyway, for their political careers, for their survival. I mean, look at these leaders. Look at these arguably the weakest, the most morally bereft, ethically void political, quote, leaders in living memory. And we've had some bad ones before. But collectively, this is this new class of emotionless, vain, narcissistic bureaucrats. And they're at the head of every major country in decision-making positions. It's incredible. So we are definitely in need of a rebirth this year, this Easter, something to think about. And I think about the Holy Land. If you're a Christian, of course, this should take more of a deeper meaning. Because right now in the Holy Land, especially if you're an American Christian, or American Christian evangelist, or Christian Zionist, that your tax money is going to pay for 500-pound bombs that are turning ancient Christian churches to dust. The Israelis have destroyed scores of them, and they have killed thousands of Christians in Palestine. Yes, there are Christians in Palestine, the descendants of the first Christians, the descendants of Jesus. They're there. That is the Holy Land, Palestine. And you're paying for aiding and abetting the evisceration of historic Palestine, the Holy Land. That's what you're doing. Unbeknownst to yourselves, clearly you don't get it. And Israel certainly doesn't care. If they did, they wouldn't have done it. And also they wouldn't have blown up every university in Gaza, every higher education institution. And even last Palm Sunday, I woke up and the first thing I see in the news is Al-Ahli Hospital, one of the last working hospitals in Gaza, was attacked by the IDF. And I see people cheering on social media, pro-Israeli, saying, we're going to go for every hospital. We're going to get every last bunker, tunnel. What do hospitals have to do with anything other than helping and saving people, saving lives, caring for the wounded? They've destroyed all of them. The scenes of Gaza, desolate, total annihilation. This makes Dresden look like a light treatment of carpet bombing. This should give pause to anybody in the West. If you haven't spoken up against this, if you haven't opposed it, if you haven't vocally to your friends, family, colleagues, in your church, in your workplace, in your political communities, if you haven't vocally opposed this, then you are a party to it, because you can't claim ignorance. Not with the sheer volume of content and information that's already been broadcast, is available at your fingertips. To feign ignorance on this issue is disingenuous at best, at its worst, pure evil. There's nothing else that one can say about that. You know, and you might say, well, I don't want to take the Palestinian side because that would make me pro-Hamas. Pro-Hamas. But this term Hamas has been used as a broad brush in order to label everything of any resistance to an illegal Israeli occupation and now a genocide as being somehow tantamount to terrorism or allied with terrorism. This is just a disingenuous legal maneuver performed by the US and its allies, the UK, the European countries, at the behest of the Israeli lobby. That's all it is. If you were to get technical about it, say, what about the political wing of Hamas? They're not terrorists, are they? The people doing aid, community work, education, healthcare, sanitation, is that terrorism as well? But really, if you look at the UN Charter and UN resolutions, multiple examples. The UN recognizes any country under an illegal occupation as having a right to an armed liberation resistance struggle. Armed resistance struggle is recognized under international law as a right. And any illegal occupying military force has no rights in that occupied territory. That means Israel and the IDF, or IOF, the Israeli occupation forces, not defense forces. Just calling balls and strikes. Let's dispense with the euphemisms. So by doing that, it's created a chilling effect. And they're trying to impose that on US students, people around Europe, and so forth, to get people to shut up. So they don't point out the obvious that's what's going on, is it's an unprecedented, historic massacre. An indiscriminate use of overwhelming military force against the civilian population. And God bless, and there have been so many important voices that have been there to give testament to what's happening and to try to stop it. I could never name them all, but on this Easter weekend, I would say thank you and God bless Pastor Munter Isaac in Bethlehem, in Palestine. The UN Special Rapporteur of Human Rights for Palestine, Francesca Albanese, and the great scholar Norm Finkelstein, Ilian Pape. There's so many. And most of all, the people of Gaza, who've been taking a stand, and just by the mere act of survival is the ultimate form of resistance. This is a level of resiliency never seen before in history. Never. Ever. Never. If the Pope did anything, he'd canonize every last person in Gaza for what they've had to withstand and put up with and suffer. Those who've survived anyway is extraordinary. Takes a strong constitution, strong faith. These are really, really resilient and strong-willed people. Look at what they've been through. They refuse to leave the land. That should tell you everything you need to know. That if you're rooting against them, or you're advocating for their annihilation, or you're calling for their forced expulsion, as native residents of Palestine, then you are absolutely on the wrong side of history. Profoundly on the wrong side of history. So, while the state and the establishment are spending all of their time and effort and energy to silence, to intimidate, to threaten, to cancel people who are speaking up and criticizing the gravest of injustices in a way that are really digging their own grave in historical terms anyway. They're delegitimizing themselves so epically. It will go down in history as the ultimate self-own, I guess. But it's sad. You know, without free speech, without the ability to express your opinion, especially expressing your opinion as it pertains to an injustice, especially as it pertains to a war crime, but even more especially if it pertains to a crime against humanity. If it pertains to a wanton mass slaughter of innocent people, of tens of thousands of women and children, many of whom are still being dug out of the rubble in Gaza, many of whom will not be discovered for a very long time. If you're speaking out against that, that's what that First Amendment was intended for. That's what the principle of free speech was introduced into the era of democracy. It was introduced for that reason, to prevent those very things from happening. And look now as they happen. And look who's trying to silence people who are trying to point out and trying to stop what is happening. And that's all you need to know about where things are at in 2025. So you have to decide what you need to do to course correct this incredible diversion of Western civilization. Maybe we can learn a thing or two from other civilizations, non-Western civilizations. They might have something to say as well. What we don't want is for the situation to careen into a third world war. So it's incumbent upon people like Donald Trump and his inner circle, especially because the US has the power. They have the gold, the money, the bombs, the satellites. They really have the power at the end of the day. They can decide whether this is going to careen out of control or not, or if another 100,000 people are going to have to die for some extreme ethno-nationalist ideology, imported ethno-nationalist settler colonial ideology. Yeah, the Trump White House is going to have to decide how this story ends. Otherwise, other countries, other people will have to intervene to try to change the course of events, because they don't want to sit there. They won't accept another 100, 200,000 or more people killed for no reason other than they're an inconvenience to some expansive colonial settler state. How else are we supposed to interpret this? You might not like my interpretation. It might make you uncomfortable. You might try to accuse me of being this or that. No, I'm just reading it as it is. I'm being pretty conciliatory, actually. This is a pretty lightweight treatment. That's kind of what it is, though. And it might make you feel better to deny it, but it's not going to make the situation any better. Your denial will probably ultimately contribute to this being much worse. Eventually it will affect you wherever you are. Nobody's going to be safe from this level of violence, this level of depravity, this level of sheer corruption, total abuse of power, the ultimate abuse of power. It will come home to roost wherever you are. It always does, eventually. And if it's not in your lifetime, it'll be in your children's or their children's. why don't we do them a favor and make sure that doesn't happen? At least do our best to make sure that doesn't happen. So I don't really know what to say this Easter beyond that. These are just a few thoughts I had in my head. Want to get out of the studio for once, and this might be our last lick of good weather here for another week or two. But I appreciate you guys joining us. This is a shorter than normal Sunday Wire, but it's nice to do something a little different. We'll be back with the normal programming during the week for the midweek Wire, and also next Sunday we'll have a full program next Sunday here at 21stcenturywire.com. And again, thank you to everybody who has donated and supported our media outlet. We've been running this platform since late 2009, built it up from a small blog site, and we continue to work at it, making headway. We need your support definitely to do more. So we appreciate any of you who have donated or subscribed and become a member, monthly subscriber to 21wire.tv. There's links top of my X profile and on our website at 21st Century Wire, so you can support us that way. But that's all we've got time for today. Again, thank you so much for joining us, and just a few thoughts really on Easter. Nothing really. I hope you're with, if you are celebrating this holiday or you have time off, I hope you're able to spend it with family and do something worthwhile, meaningful. I certainly will be doing that. So, but take care, everybody, and we'll leave you with a couple of very poignant pieces of art, or what they call music, from a very dear friend and a very talented songwriter, Joseph Arthur. We'll leave you with that. Take care, everybody. All the best.
Say about who we are. digital images and digital lies cut out their heart along with their supplies. The propaganda leads to dehumanize our fellow humans and silence their cries. Ceasefire now. Ceasefire now. Ceasefire now in Gaza somehow. Without equality, there will always be war. We have all the history to see how it's happened before. Travel as equals, equality for all, or else mankind will surely fall. Ceasefire now. Ceasefire now. Ceasefire now in Gaza somehow. 'Cause this might be the last time to raise a hand about who we are. What's this say about who we are? 'Cause this might be the last time to raise a hand about who we are. What's this say about who we are? Genocide is never justified. There ain't no reason. 'Cause human beings are more than just a kind, defined by race or religion. 'Cause we all have souls and a mission here on earth. Only God knows why. You can't decide their death, 'cause you weren't here for their birth or their first laugh or cry. Don't let the children die. Don't let the children die. Sisters and brothers, we know it's wrong when we see their fathers cry with their mothers. Genocide is never justified. There ain't no reason. 'Cause human beings are is why you can't decide their death, 'cause you weren't here for their birth or their first laugh or cry. Don't let the children die. Don't let the children die.